start with what spoiled a good game actually in the first 20 minutes, the red card incident. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the red, it was one that at the time I thought it was a weird one. I'm not quite sure whether the referee thinks it's a red to begin with, because he seems to take his time, let the player run away and then change his mind. But yeah, having seen it back, I think it's one of those that probably, I think it's fair to say 9 times out of 10 you maybe get away with it. Whether you necessarily should get away with it, I don't know. It is a red card for me. It's more than just stopping a counter attack. It's a bit of a swipe, a hack at the player, and I think Sadio Mane has been caught sort of knee high or so, so far up the knee that up the leg, sorry, that I don't think you can really argue with it too much. So yeah, it was the right call, I think, for me. Slightly strange one, certainly having seen it in real time. It didn't look quite right, but yeah, I think we were all expecting a yellow. But to be honest, the red comes out, and I don't think the game changed that much. I think Liverpool were well in control, quite obviously the better team. Even before that red card, it was just a case then of being professional, doing what they'd been doing up until that point, to be fair, and just keeping the ball, dominating, and that's what they did. So yeah, obviously it makes it slightly easier. It did in the other game against Atletico as well, obviously with Griezmann's red card. But yeah, I don't think Atletico can have too many complaints, and even had it been 11v11, you'd really fancy Liverpool to have won that one anyway.
I'll just go back to the start as well. You mentioned that there's some great individual performances. Obviously, Klopp made 5 changes tonight. One of them, Diogo Jota, scored within 10 minutes as well. What a great way to cement his place in the team.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent, actually. He was unlucky, I think, with one of the goals that I think it was him that had one chalked off for offside, wasn't it? He was very, very lively, and I think that all of the front three were really good. Obviously, Sadio Mane goes off at half time, but I think between him and Jota, they were really energetic in that first half. They were high pressure, really sort of getting into the atmosphere, and I think we probably have seen the best of Diogo Jota in Europe, to be fair. I think, that was kind of the platform that gave him most of his opportunities when he came into the team last season. Obviously scored lots of goals, gets himself a hat-trick in one of those games. Obviously has not scored as many this season in that regard, but I think, it was a really good performance from him. And yeah, just to see not just him, but all of them kind of back to just doing the natural things that they are really good at, and just finishing things, running really hard, doing all of the basics. It was nothing spectacular, but I think it was, again, a really good performance from him. And, to get the goal is certainly no bad thing.
You briefly touched on Mane there as well. I thought he had an amazing first half, to be honest. Obviously, very eventful for him too, getting a goal as well. What do you think of his performance?
Yeah, no surprise that he came off. I think it's fair that obviously Liverpool didn't want to take that risk with him. I think we've seen it before with Atletico. They tend to target him, and I don't know quite what they've seen. It's a strange one, because we don't see it in many games really, where Sadio Mane is kind of on the edge, if you like. Obviously gets himself booked and could quite easily have got another yellow, given the nature of the referee on the night. So it was a sensible decision to take him off, but it was no slight on his performance. I thought, again, similar to Jota, really effective, really high pressing. Some of his movements were just back to the Sadio Mane of old. I always mention it on this show, the kind of thing where he just stops and then goes again, and the defender just, by the time he's stopped, he's already taken off and beaten him. So I think we saw that a few times. He just looked a lot sharper, and I think it's 12 starts for him this season now, and he scored 8 goals in that period. So even though this was possibly his best performance, I know it was only half a game, but possibly, just in terms of the minutes he played, might be his best performance of the season so far. Even when he's not been playing at that same standard, he's still finding the back of the net on a regular basis.
Just going to turn the attention now to the midfield. I think we've had a bit of a doom and gloom week with the Brighton game about the midfield crisis, or is it a crisis? How do you think Chamberlain and Fabinho came back in today and did?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Fabinho. I think it's not necessarily the whole reason, or it certainly isn't the entire sort of explanation for Liverpool being much, much better than they were at the weekend that he is back. But there's no doubt that it makes a massive, massive difference. I think just having him there, the assurance that he brings for the defence, the passing ability, all the elements of his game, really. Liverpool only have one Fabinho in other positions. Obviously, they've got other players that can come in. I just don't think Jordan Henderson can do that job. Obviously, he's fantastic in his own right and had a brilliant game tonight, but he can't do that number 6 job anywhere near to the same level that Fabinho can. So I think he was really, really impressive. Oxlade-Chamberlain as well. There was a few bits where he maybe should have made a different decision. There was a few bits where he kind of goes on a mazy dribble and doesn't pass when he should do. But generally speaking, I thought he was really good as well. So hopefully the little knock that he got isn't too big. Obviously, that's been the big thing for him, hasn't it? Whenever he's played well, there's always been an injury at the end of that. But I think for both of them, and Thiago, of course, who came off the bench, it's a big step forward in terms of just having those options available. Curtis Jones obviously missing tonight as well with a little injury. I don't think that will keep him out for too long, but I think you could really tell at the weekend that the midfield looked tired, and it does only take 1 or 2 players to come in and rejuvenate that. Fabinho was one of those, and Chamberlain did really well as well. So yeah, it's gone from maybe a crisis in terms of the numbers to suddenly looking a little bit more healthy. And I think Thiago looked really sharp as well. I was really impressed when he came on. So hopefully it's one of those things that they can kind of just get into a bit of a rhythm, at least have sort of 4 or 5 players available. It's so unfortunate when you've got all of those players injured at the same time. It does put pressure on them, but hopefully for the majority of this season, that just won't be the case.
You've just touched on there, Thiago coming back as well. How important can he be? I think Klopp's been a bit dubious with his answers in press conferences recently about his recovery. How crucial can he be as we get into the rough part of the season?
Yeah, no, it's a massive part of the season, and I think a game like that was perfect for him to come into. I think we saw it when he made his debut last season against Chelsea. It was a similar situation in that Liverpool just had to be professional, keep hold of the ball, keep things ticking, and that's what he does brilliantly well. I think there's lots of games obviously that you'd like him to be there, and obviously the skill set that he has is adaptable enough to play against a number of different opponents. But I think it was really good tonight. Obviously off the back of, I think, 6 or 7 weeks that he's been out. It's certainly been a sort of medium term injury. When he went off actually against Crystal Palace, I didn't even realise it was an injury. I just thought he'd gone off because obviously it was about an hour into the game. I just thought that was a normal substitution. So for it to keep him out for so long was a bit of a blow for Liverpool. But yeah, he's back. He looks sharp, and obviously having come back off such a long layoff, you do wonder, is it going to be straight away that it clicks? But it did seem to be the case. And yeah, I think we can probably expect him and Fabinho as well to play from the start of the weekend, which I think, against a team as good as West Ham, that would be, a huge thing. Be interesting to see if he goes on international duty. I know that obviously Liverpool fans will hope not. I suspect that it could actually work in their favour this time. I think if he can go with Spain and maybe get a couple of games in there, it might not be the worst thing in the world.
Another sharp performance tonight from Kostas Tsimikas, who just continues to impress me, puts in performance after performance. Can he push Robertson for the left-back position, or do you think maybe a step too far?
I don't know. It's one of those. I think I've been reluctant so far to say it, but I think that there is a case for it at this point. I think Andy Robertson dropping out tonight was partly because of the performances that he's put in of late, partly because just obviously the workload is. I suppose that the two are linked together, aren't they? The fact he's not playing at his best is because he is tired, and when you've got a player as good as Tsimikas to come in and do a job, pretty much the exact same player, isn't it, really, in terms of the quality? There's not too much between them. Certainly the style of play is very similar. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Robertson will come back in at the weekend. I'd be surprised if Tsimikas kept his place, but I don't know. It's a position of real strength for Liverpool. I mentioned the number 6 position with Fabinho not being there, you really are worried. But I think if Liverpool were to lose one of their left backs, you just wouldn't really notice it too much, which I think is a massive compliment, really, given what Andy Robertson has done for Tsimikas to come in and make that kind of impact is really impressive. And I think Jurgen Klopp mentioned it actually in his press conference that probably Tsimikas could have had a couple of assists there tonight. He put some really brilliant balls into the box, and I think that is one area of his game. I think his delivery into the box, not just in play in general play, but also from dead balls as well. I actually think it's maybe an upgrade on Robertson. I still think Robertson's the overall better player, but some of those deliveries are absolutely superb.
Yeah, it really is a shame for him that he's probably got, one of the world's best left back over the past 5 years ahead of him in the same team, because he's putting in some amazing performances. But I'm just going to move on now to Atletico. I think we have to start with Luis Suarez on his return. Bit of a disappointment for him, but not for Liverpool fans, or maybe some, not the others.
Yeah, he got a mixed reception. I know there was a lot of people sort of clapping him when he went off, a lot of people booing him. It seemed to be, one end of the spectrum or the other. It's one of those. It's a long time, isn't it, since he's left? He's come back a couple of times now, and neither occasion it's gone the way that he would have wanted it to go. I think, today Matip and Van Dijk were superb against him, didn't really give him a kick. He was getting a little bit frustrated. You could see the arms being waved about and all of the usual sort of antics going on. But yeah, it didn't need to be the main story for Liverpool tonight. The main story for them is that they've got through, they've topped the group, they've not made any silly mistakes or played as poorly as what they have done against Brighton. So for Liverpool, I think the biggest positive involving Suarez is just that it didn't become, the narrative. You could quite easily see him, getting sent off or getting into an argument with someone or scoring the winning goal, whatever it might have been. You could always sort of see his name being in the headlines. But I think for Liverpool, it's just a massive positive, really, that we don't have to talk about him. He didn't do anything that deserves talking about. He was very, very quiet on the night. And yeah, I'm sure, there's a lot of respect there, I think, for the player that he is. But, the past is the past. Liverpool have moved on. And yeah, they've got far, far better players than Luis Suarez, in his current form, at least at the moment.
Yeah, it was a very quiet second half as we cruised to the knockouts. But on that as well, I mentioned at the top of the show, how helpful will that be that we've already qualified?
I think it's huge. I think that was, a massive sort of thing in terms of the injuries, particularly, earlier in the week when we weren't quite sure on Thiago and Fabinho's involvement. I think that would have been a big thing for them to win the game tonight and get themselves, through, and not just through, but top of the group as well. I think it doesn't massively matter second or first, but now we know for sure that Jurgen Klopp can make wholesale changes if he so chooses. It is interesting that he could have actually done that last season against Midtjylland, and Diogo Jota played and then got injured and was missing for 3 months. So it's not necessarily a given, I don't think, that it might be, Tyler Morton and Kate Gordon and players like that playing in these two games. I do still think for, rhythm purposes, certainly the goalkeeper will be there. Probably a couple of obviously the four centre-backs, two of them will play. Tsimikas or Robertson will play. It will still be, broadly speaking, a first team, a senior team from Liverpool. But there's no pressure. There's no kind of anxiety. We've seen it plenty of times, Liverpool having to win on the last game. And, you could really do without that in, a midweek in December, going away to Milan, I think, isn't it, on the last day, going to the San Siro. I think, for Liverpool to have absolutely no pressure on them is a massive thing. And to be able to just play basically whoever they want. If they need to give players minutes, they can do. If Mohamed Salah wants to play because he wants to score a goal, he can do. But yeah, it's just a case of being sensible. And obviously, it's a big thing. It's a long way that Liverpool have come since, obviously not being in the Champions League when Jurgen Klopp arrived to now be one of those teams that has just got it wrapped up so quickly. I think it just speaks volumes for the quality that they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. So Klopp made 5 changes tonight, obviously. Would you keep any of those for Sunday's game with West Ham? Obviously, 5 players changed from the Brighton team. What are your thoughts on the selection process?
I mean, I suppose it depends slightly on injuries. I think that the latest on Roberto Firmino is that it's a hamstring again, which I think is what happened with him against Chelsea, I think, isn't it, a few weeks back. So I'd expect him probably not to be there. So then it will be a case of Mane, Jota and Salah being the front three. I think in midfield, I mentioned Thiago before. The fact that he's got minutes in his legs now says to me that you'd probably play him at the weekend. Fabinho will definitely play. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The defence is interesting. I think that there is an argument to go back to Konate playing centre-back just because of Mikel Antonio and the threat that he has. Possibly there's a case for that, but Matip did absolutely nothing wrong there tonight, and Van Dijk will certainly be there. We mentioned the left-back question before. That'll be an interesting one. And Trent Alexander-Arnold will play because he's Trent, and I thought he was excellent as well tonight. So I think there'll be a couple of changes from the Brighton game, but it wouldn't massively surprise me if one or two players did come back in, because that's what they've got the squad for. That's why they've made these changes. That's why they've brought on Minamino and Origi and players like that to rotate and rest when they can. To be honest, I don't think today's performance will massively play into the thinking for the weekend. I think as much as Jurgen Klopp will say no, it's game by game. I think at the start of this week, they'd have known pretty much who was playing Brighton, who was playing today, and who was playing on Sunday. So I don't think it changes too much, but there are one or two questions I think still to be answered.
Do you think the midfield crisis could turn into midfield headache ahead of the game?
Possibly. It depends on, I suppose, the injury to Chamberlain is one that you'd have to think about. I don't think he quite did enough to justify being in there in terms of, I mean, that just sums up his problem, doesn't it? That even when he plays well, you still think there's three players who are better than him. There's still Curtis Jones to come back as well. So I don't think it's a massive headache. It's obviously just before the internationals, so you can kind of play whoever you want and sort of send them off to their countries after that. So I think for me, it will be a case of it being Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson. I'd be surprised if it was anything other than that, to be honest. I think that's the strongest midfield that Liverpool can put out. And West Ham are a team that you cannot take lightly. I think they've shown that time and time again last season and this season as well. They're a really good side. So yeah, take the opportunity to play those three together. I don't think they've done it more than 2 or 3 times in Liverpool since Thiago came in just over a year ago. So yeah, I think for me, it's pretty much going to be those three.
Well, Matt, I think that's all now. I think we've pretty much gone through everything. So we're still unbeaten this season. That goes to 16 games, through to the knockouts of the Champions League, and still in all the competitions. Not a bad start, is it?
No, absolutely. It's a good place to be in, and I think the 2 spare games as well, I think really plays into Liverpool's hands. So yeah, not a bad position to be in, but certainly things can still get better.